Yeah, because we can talk about us and our therapy.
Well, let me say something too, because I think this is important that you mentioned, like, and I don't know, maybe we'll get back around to it, but that thing where you talk about in the Black community, it's always go to God or let's pray about it. And the simple answer to that is like, yes, let's pray about it, but let's put in that work too.
Yeah,
like,
okay, because what is it? Faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
That, and it's just like, we don't say, oh, I got a broken arm, let's just pray about it. No, you
right.
or whatever it is. And so I think that's so important that we say we can do both and not taking people's spirituality away, because yes, let's pray about it, but we're gonna have to put in that work. So let's just go ahead and do that. And so I think that's such an important thing, because we be praying about it, y'all.
We be praying about it. And like you said, what's up, everybody? I'm Lex.
I'm Jeremy.
And this is another episode of Ode to Black Love podcast. Y'all already know, before we get into it today, make sure you're liking, following, and subscribing to us on all social media platforms. That is at Ode to Black Love on Instagram and TikTok, and then Ode to Black Love podcast on YouTube and Facebook. Also, don't forget, we got the shirts ready. You already know we have the shirts available. We have them ready for order. So be sure to head on over to odetobblacklove.com to place your order. We have the new shirts as well as last season shirts available. So yeah, go ahead and head to the website and check them out. That was a mouthful. But now that that's out the way, you already know. Today is a special day.
It's really special.
A really special day.
We ain't even lying this time.
right. You know, most times I say, oh, we got special guests. But no, today is really, really special to us because, as y'all know, Jeremy and I are very, very big advocates of therapy.
We always talking about it.
I feel like our podcast should be Ode to Black Therapy because we literally love talking about therapy, our experiences individually as well as a couple, and just how much growth we've gained from going to therapy. And so we were like thinking about this last season and especially this season, but about the fact that we wanted to have a therapist on Ode to Black Love to kind of talk about some things that, you know, you go through and you learn from therapy. So I reached out to my profile, Jordie Smith, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, to pick her brain on today's episode. So y'all, it's going to be great. We're super excited. We have some questions. And yeah, we just going to kick it with Jordie today and talk about therapy. So Jordie, how are you?
Well, hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Jordie. I am a licensed couples and family therapist. My credentials are LMFT, but I always like to encourage all couples to try out therapy. So I do like to introduce myself by saying I'm a couples and family therapist.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you. And I'm so glad that you even mentioned that because that's a question that we had for you today. First and foremost, let's just jump in. When do you suggest couples even start therapy? Is it when they get married or before?
Yeah. So I always suggest that couples do premarital counseling.
Okay.
Because it's nice to know kind of like what you're jumping into. And it's not this thing that's like, oh, if we go, then maybe we're going to find out we don't need to be together or something like that. But it's more so of like this whole journey of just being a couple, finding your partner, finding your husband or wife or whatever is about growth and like growing together. And so a lot of times I refer to my own husband as my purpose partner. So it's just like this is the person that I'm building with. This is the person that I'm being, you know, this is who I'm with, right? But even if you're not thinking about marriage, because let's be honest, not everybody wants to do marriage. If you're thinking about doing anything long term as a couple, I think that counseling is great.
Okay.
That's good. So, I mean, I guess we kind of hop into it. I like that we kind of got that portion out of the way. It's kind of important because, like you said, therapy could kind of be very intimidating. I know it took me months and months and months to go. It took for my wife to sign me up. Basically, she like did all of the work, and I had to do all like the other. You know what I'm saying? Like she went as far as she could win. I had to go the other way.
Yeah.
So so I can know how intimidating it can be. So I guess I'll just kind of ask, like, why do you feel like it's important
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important because a therapist is so much different than just a friend or a mentor or whatever. So we obviously have training, but it really is this non-judgmental, confidential space where we're helping you build your skills. So it's just like thinking like, we have some things in our lives where there's like an old wives' tale of, oh, if you got a cough, go do this or go cut something off a tree or whatever. And those things can work sometimes, but then there's some things you got to go into surgery for and you need a doctor for, right? And I think that's like therapy too. You can talk to people in your life and they can give you really good advice and different things like that. But then sometimes you have to go to a trained professional to get some of those things kind of worked out and know that you're coming into a judge-free space. And I think that is so important. But I do also want to touch on something Jeremy said about how scary it is to go to therapy. Because that's real.
Yeah, it is. Yes. That first session be like, I know pulling up, I'm like, go on and turn around. Just go on and turn around. Because it's very intimidating. Yes.
And I think I always say it's like finding a therapist is like dating, because you got to find the right person that you can vibe with, right? You don't want to just tell anybody your business. I always recommend people do consultations before you just pick a therapist. So call them up and say, hey, can I just chat with you for 15 minutes? Just kind of see what their style is.
That's good.
Cool,
yeah, most of us have pretty good intuition where you know if you're vibing with a person or not.
Right.
And then you kind of go. But I always say you can always fire your therapist too. Like you go in for that first session, you're not feeling it, like, and find somebody else. So it is scary and it's understandable because you are being so vulnerable in that space. So just recognizing that and calling that out, I appreciate, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what is couples therapy like can you explain from a therapist perspective, because we know our perspective, but can you touch on what it's like for others?
Yes. So therapy is an interesting thing because lots of different therapists have different styles. So I'll speak on my style and just kind of the basics of therapy. So the basics are you all coming in with your goal or me helping you figure out what your goal is in therapy. And then I'm guiding you through that. I don't have a goal to keep you together. I don't have a goal to take a side. I don't have any of those things. Sometimes people come as a couple and we call it discernment therapy because they're trying to figure out they're trying to still stay together. And so we guide through those things. So it's really making sure we're all on the same page of what are the goals in this relationship. And then we kind of go from there. And they can change throughout. But typically what I do as a therapist is I set it up as the first 4 sessions are an assessment. The first time I meet with you all together, if they start arguing or whatever, I'm like, yes, give me all the real.
Be authentic.
Yes, be authentic. And then the second and third session, I typically split my couples up. I assess for any type of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, financial abuse, emotional abuse, any of those things to make sure that we're safe and that we can proceed. Because everybody cannot do couples therapy. If you're going through a situation where you are not safe, I don't recommend doing it. And we can talk about that later too. Because there's some of the things we try to act like don't happen, but it does.
Right.
So I split them up. If there's something that, you feel more comfortable telling me by yourself or whatever. That's the only time I split my couples up because it is couples therapy. But I want to make sure we're in a good place and that we're a good fit, that we can do it. And then after that, the 4th session, we like, what are these goals? Let's get to it. Let's do this work. I am a therapist who gives homework. So I explain to my couples, therapy is like working out, just like physical health. If you do it once a week, you come to me once a week, we gonna do a little workout. You're gonna see some results, but it may not be as much as if you apply these tools every day. So I'll say, hey, this is what what this is, the goal is. Let's go ahead and apply this to this week. When y'all come back at the top of the hour, I'm gonna say, okay, how'd they work out? What we doing?
Right.
And so it can look different, but that's kind of like the meat and bones of like what it is.
Okay, so I kind of want to dive into what you mentioned when you said making sure the environment is safe. So in regards to that, like, I guess, what does that mean and look like? Can you expound on that for us?
Absolutely. So I am personally a believer in change. So if somebody tells me that they have had intimate partner violence, that's not a super red flag where I'm like, no, we can't. But if something is currently going on, and I know that if I'm in the session with the couple and honesty is not going to be able to come out because somebody is fearing for their life or fearing for backlash, then we know that we're not in a space to do therapy right now. And I'll just say, hey, I recommend individual therapy, and then we can come back together and see what this looks like. Okay. So we don't want to just say no therapy at all, right? Because people can change, but it's not for me to put them in it, because you want to be vulnerable. We want to be out in the open, right? So if one person is in fear, and if they say something in the session and then when they go home, it's not going to be a good situation, that's not helpful.
Right. Okay.
I have a question. Sorry, Alexis. But I was saying, what do you say to like those couples that you have one person that wants to come and one person that doesn't want to come? Because I feel like that can be an issue. Like we agreed to come, but I know that a lot of times, especially when I talk to other people, some people are like, well, they're not going for that. Or, you know, I mentioned it and they don't want to really go for that. They're not trying to go to no therapist, blah, blah, blah. So what do you say about that kind of situation?
I'll say this. If people show up, they want to be there for a reason. So here's the thing. Yes, baby. Like when people, because sometimes I'll have somebody come in and say, I don't want to be here. But I say, well, then why did you show up today? What brought you here? Yeah. And so really showing up to therapy is not necessarily a thing that maybe they don't want to be there, but they want to save their marriage or they want to save their relationship. So I say, okay, well then let's just pretend this is just a means to an end to save the relationship. You can see me for 8 times, so let's just see how it goes. Yeah. But if we can't even get the person in the door, I recommend doing your individual work first and not forcing somebody. Like my wife said, if I don't come, I'm gonna have to sleep on the couch tonight or something like that. That's not healthy. You're not ready to do the work. So what I would say is you keep doing your work, and you can also, sometimes people can see the change in you, your husband, your wife, whatever, and they're like, oh, you be going to therapy? Let me try this out. Or it may be one of those things where you said, like Leck was like, kind of did that front end work for you. You were like, okay, this is kind of cool. I can try it out for one session. Yeah. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that was really good. That was really good.
And yeah, I think with Jeremy, I think you wanted to go, right? Maybe you didn't want to go. I
mean,
I think Jeremy knew he needed to go.
Yeah, I needed to go.
I think that's what it was. Jeremy knew he needed to go, and so I'm like, okay, well, I'll set the appointment because he don't like talking on the phone. He's not doing all that. So I'm like, okay.
I don't like calling random people and wanting to meet with random people and do, Alexis found her for me.
And I've been knowing that about him. So I was like, you know what? I'll call, make sure they accept the insurance. I'll do all the part that I know you hate. And then it's up to you to respond to this woman with the follow-up. And he did.
I did. It took me some days, but I did.
It took him a while. It took him a while. Yeah. But
what do you think for you, Jeremy, that was that thing where you were like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and follow up. She did that work.
Well, one, I needed to go. I felt like, I had a reason to go. Because the reason I truly went, I mean, me and Alexis had a little bit of issues, but I really had issues with my mom, my birth mom. And it was just some issues, underlying issues. And my son was just being born kind of deal. And it was just like, I need to get this out of me or figure out if it's something that can be fixed, because I don't want to continue to carry this stuff. And, I feel some kind of way in between my son and my mom. So I knew I needed to go for that. But then, like, as far as like actually like following up, like Alexis just asked me about it essentially. She's like, did you ever get back to and I was like, you don't want to like say no all the time. So it's like, all right. I think I might have said and didn't do it yet, but like I didn't want to be a liar. So it's like, I said that I did it. Let me like follow up, because Alexis did email her and she reached out to me. And so let me go ahead and do it. Like I said, I mean, I've been going for a year now.
Yes.
A little over a year now. So I only missed like a few weeks, so I've been to a lot of sessions now. So it's like, it's pretty cool. Like I said, I've grown and it's changed a lot, but I do think it's hard to get over that hump. I mean, it helps when you have somebody to push you over the hump. But
accountability.
Exactly. Have somebody push you over the hump. But I mean, like, I don't think I had anybody again that would I didn't have anybody to like talk to about it. So I don't know anybody or had anybody that really was like an advocate for it. You know what I'm saying? For me to like
anybody, you mean like another black man?
Like a friend, black man, friend, or anything that was like actively like going. So it's like, oh, okay, like not that I thought it was abnormal, but it wasn't like a motivating factor. It was just like, okay, like I'm like the only one. It's not really like any like motivation, no necessarily peer pressure, not a good word, but like that's the only thing I can think. Like no pressure from the outside to like go. So it's just like, yeah, I just have to make the decision for myself. And so I think that was kind of part of it. But I mean, once I made the leap, the first couple, like you said, those assessment, it's like, you gotta like go through and just like, I mean, they don't know nothing about you. You just gotta just start telling your business. And it's interesting. It's like, like, it's like you gotta really be honest. It's like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Can I say, sorry, can I interrupt for a second to say this too? Because I think you said an important thing about not knowing anybody that's went to therapy or whatever. And I think what's so important about following purpose or following that itch when you're told to do something or you had that feeling is that y'all have this platform where people are sharing their stories, right?
Yes.
And even you guys are sharing your stories. And I'm a big believer of like sharing our stories is what heals people, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody else being able to relate to us or whatever. So it's like now somebody's gonna be listening to this y'all's podcast and being like, let me just try this.
Yes.
Or like, let me see if she can get the paperwork done for me or whatever. You don't know how powerful that is of just being vulnerable in a space. You don't even gotta say a lot about why you're going, but just like I be going.
And it's helping. I think we've encouraged a lot of people, like a lot of people around us. I've gotten multiple. So I was the first one in, and it's so funny because I feel like in the Black community, growing up, and just even maybe a few years ago, I remember one of my sisters talking about like, man, anxiety, a little bit of depression, and saying like, I think I need to go to counseling. And I remember like somebody in the group chat being like, girl, you need to go to God, just kind of like doing that. But now to see my family and where we are, like I have half of my siblings or half of us are in therapy. The other ones are asking for the contact information. So you are so right that the power of that vulnerability like allows other people to say, you know what, let me go on and try this out because if so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so is learning from it, then maybe I can too. And that's real.
And that's progress too. I have so many people in my life. Obviously, I can't be a therapist for people I know.
Absolutely.
But they'll ask for contact. I'll follow up and say, hey, did you go? And they'll say no. And sometimes that can happen and we get frustrated with people. But the thing is, for people to even ask and consider is such a big thing too. It's already kind of showing that like self-love. There's like this saying of whatever you're wanting to do, you've already started. So if you're wanting to heal, even just the want to do it, you've already started healing. If you want to love, you've already started loving because you have this want for it. So you're already starting the process. And so I think that's so big. Just for you guys, like I said, sharing it. And then like you said, now all your sisters and whatever people are just asking. So that's awesome.
Right. Yeah, I think it definitely makes us feel good inside to know like people are actually seeing what we're doing and like not just taking notes, but just kind of like, okay, you know what, they're encouraged and led by it. So that definitely be feeling good. But anyway, off of that,
we like to talk about us.
Yeah, because we can talk about us and our therapy.
Well, let me say something too, because I think this is important that you mentioned, like, and I don't know, maybe we'll get back around to it, but that thing where you talk about in the Black community, it's always go to God or let's pray about it. And the simple answer to that is like, yes, let's pray about it, but let's put in that work too. Like,
because what is it? Faith without works is dead.
That, and it's just like we don't say, "Oh, I got a broken heart. Let's just pray about it." No, or whatever it is. And so I think that's so important that we say we can do both and not taking people's spirituality away. Because yes, let's pray about it, but we gonna have to put in that work. So let's just go ahead and do that. And so I think that's such an important thing because we be praying about it, y'all.
We be praying about it. And like you said, you're going to have to do some work too. Like, pray about it, keep praying about it, but also put in that work to make things better.
Well, I would say before we get too far away from that, you mentioned the word like work. I mean, I think we always mention it. Like therapy is a lot of work. I think like people, maybe you'll be better. Like people need to understand, like you have to also put in work on your half, to get something out of it. It's not just like you go in there and that person like fixes you. You got to do a lot of fixing for yourself,
right,
that kind of deal.
So can you talk about that, like what that work is and looks like?
Yes, absolutely. So as soon as I do a consultation, and I do a consultation with every client that comes in for me, I always tell them, like, I'm not a therapist that's just going to sit and listen or just give advice. Like, I do give homework. And I know I said that earlier, but are you willing to do the homework? And I want that to be just the foundation of our relationship, like putting that boundary up already. So that work is hard. And so obviously we're flexible. Life happens. If somebody comes back and like, I didn't get to it, I'd be like, well, good. How did you love on yourself today? Because I can understand I didn't get to my work this week either, right? And sometimes that's okay. But when we think about putting in that work, it really is, and I keep going back to this because this is the easiest way that I can kind of explain it. But like, you can go to the gym and walk in all day long, but if you don't start getting on the treadmill or pick up some weights, you're not gonna see nothing. You can be in there, right? You can be in the therapy room and I can talk about it or whatever. But it really is being like, I'm willing to go into a vulnerable space. I'm willing to trust. And trust is a huge thing. And that's why I really encourage you to get with a therapist. Just don't stick with somebody just because you went in there. Like, if your intuition is saying this doesn't feel like a person that I feel comfortable with, like, try somebody else. Because I think sometimes people are turned off by therapists because one partner likes a therapist and one person doesn't or whatever. And you really want to feel like, this is a person we can get behind. We understand they're non-biased. They're not picking sides, even though I have my mess ups or whatever. And we can just really be in this space and put in this work together.
Absolutely. Okay. So in regards to couples therapy and when couples actually come see you, are there some topics that are like the most common topics that are brought up in therapy? Like I said, we only know our experience, but I'm dying to know, like, is it something that most couples come in for?
Yes. So most couples, most of the time, and I don't know what this for real percentage is, but most of the couples that call me say that they're having communication issues.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And then probably a second big one is like trust issues. Maybe there's been some infidelity or something like that. But communication is a huge one. And it's understandable. It's hard. There's so many different ways to communicate.
Yes.
We got verbals, our non-verbals. We have our different tones that we use. All of these different things that go into it. And so much of how we were brought up in our own home play a part in how we communicate with each other. And so it's hard. It's hard.
So how do you coach couples through those two topics? Or like, I know it's different probably per situation, but is there a way that you assess it and then kind of coach through each one?
Yeah. So the way that I do this is, and this goes back to self-love too, but understanding that each of us has a desire to be heard and to be seen. Each of us has a desire to be heard and seen, right? So how can you hear your partner? How can you see them? And once you hear, I don't teach couples to agree with each other.
Yes.
So we know that 69% of the things that couples disagree about will never get resolved. That's a lot.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that number.
It's not about agreeing. It's about just hear me out.
Yeah.
Just hear me out. Because oftentimes we want to respond without hearing the person. So one of the biggest tools that I give couples is to reflect back. So it's something called speaker listener. And y'all know speaker listener.
We know speaker listener.
I like that one.
that ain't my favorite.
So that's like the basic one that I start. We can start from like the first session and kind of we build on that with some other skills, but really just hearing each other out. This is what I heard you say, because oftentimes like you will respond with no, this and it's like, no, that's not really what I said. Right. So really hearing each other is so important in a relationship.
And speaker listener, like, if I guess we've been through it, so we like whatever, but like one person gotta talk, another person gotta listen, and then repeat back what they heard, and then the original speaker can say either yes, that's what I said, or no, that's not what I said. And you go through it again. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Okay. And with that, and obviously we can get into detail because sometimes people try to take the shortcut way out. And I challenge my clients and they paraphrase and don't paraphrase. So they say exactly what the other person said. And so if you say, hey, you was home work from late last night and I'm upset and there's tears running down somebody's eyes. And then the other person says, she said I was home late from work. I said, she didn't say it like that.
Yeah.
Because you want the person to feel your emotion. If you're upset, you want them to feel that and really hear that too. Ooh. So making sure that we're not just paraphrasing them, but we're paraphrasing and really getting everything into it, and being heard in that way.
Yeah. And it sounds like that kind of speaks to those different forms of communicating. Because not only did she verbally communicated, but in that situation, she emotionally communicated. She had so many other cues in that conversation that led to how she felt versus just the words that she expressed. So that's good.
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah.
We got through a couple things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. He said, duh, 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 duh. Like, no, that's not what he said. So no, I think that's definitely a good bit. And you said some people paraphrase instead of paraphrase, right?
Yes, just say exactly what I heard you say. Like, I do listen. I can tell you exactly what I said. Even though I was on my phone, I can tell you exactly. But it's like, were you really listening to me though?
Right, exactly.
You weren't feeling me though.
Right, but did you feel it though? Yeah. Okay, so now can we talk about the trust one? Because that's the second one you said they come in there for. Are there certain ways that you initially tell the couples to work on building trust? Like, how does that go?
Yes. So there are different ways. So trust encompasses so much.
Yeah.
And it's not just this trust of, I think you're going to cheat on me. Right. It's, I trust you to be at home on time. I trust you to help me with the child. I trust you to be there for me emotionally. Because oftentimes people think that just like cheating is like the biggest thing. And it's really not. That is just a symptom to a bigger problem. So cheating is not really a problem in and of itself. It's just a symptom that came out of something, right? So we want to get into these other trust factors so that we don't get to the part where we're going to other things, other vices or whatever to handle our issues. So with the trust, we say, what is going on here? What are our expectations of each other? Sometimes there's one person in a relationship that is just going along, like this is what he want or she want, but they have this resentment in them and they're just kind of doing it. So then we have a kind of breakdown in the communication, which also gives us a breakdown in trust, because you really have a different expectation, but you're not really communicating that effectively, or you're not sticking up for yourself because I'm just gonna go with it, but you really don't care, right?
Girl, this sounds like us circa a few months ago. Yeah.
So like you said, it'd be tough when people be saying stuff that you completely agree with. Yeah. Like, dang, like you start thinking about your own stuff, like she is right.
Yeah. No, that's definitely something we are working through, but had to work through in our relationship, because Jeremy, I would probably say would be the one kind of going with the flow, not necessarily stating his needs, you know what I mean? And just being more so, what does she need? Let me kind of cater to her. And through his journey of therapy, he was able to kind of gain his voice.
Yeah.
And then through our journey of couples therapy, we were able to kind of communicate what his needs look like and kind of work through that. So it changed definitely the dynamic of our relationship for the better, right? So it's like, for me, it was a little rough because it's like, ooh.
Okay, yes, I'm glad you say that, because I was going to say that. Usually when somebody starts healing, it changes the cycle. Yep. So usually we have a cycle of, she say it, I just do it. She say it, I just do it. She say it, I just do it. So after we do that for so long, and then if she say it, no, I'm giving some pushback because this is what I want. She say I'm giving some pushback. Wait a minute, this is not our cycle. Wait a minute.
Right.
Hold on. So I'm glad you said it is kind of a little rough to adjust to this like new piece. Oh, there's another voice here too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely have to go through that. And then it's when you do find your voice, like you gotta learn how to use it. You know, because it's kind of weird because like I'm asking for stuff, but I don't know exactly how to ask. So it's like, you know, and we had to work through that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. No, it's been good. Like you said, definitely a learning experience for us as a couple. And I think when one person, so like I was more vocal about what I needed from the jump, whereas he wasn't. And so with him being more vocal, you know, it may change the dynamic of the relationship to where I feel like, ooh, like, okay, I don't want to say get as much, but it's like, it's just a different dynamic that I think took a little bit to adjust to, but now being in it is like beautiful to see him, you know, not be, you know, at my beck and call, not that he was, but, you know, just like to have Shut up. But it is like I said, even though it'd be rough because it's like, oh, I got to do a lot on my own, or a lot more that I didn't used to do on my own. But now I love it, right? And I gained this different appreciation for him and the things he does, because it's like all that other stuff you was doing was just so I wouldn't be inconvenienced. But you were this whole time inconveniencing yourself. So now I see kind of like, I don't know, just like how much he was doing, and like how like, oh, this is a true partnership. Like my inconveniences don't fall on him. You know, we balance each other more so now.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess my next question, or what I want to get into now, is how do you encourage couples to be vulnerable together? I know that's not always easy for one person or both people. So is there a certain thing you do to encourage that?
Yes. So vulnerability is like my favorite thing. I love it. I'm like a crier. I'm a loud laugher. I'm a just like express the emotions type of person, and be with safe people. And so when I think about vulnerability, our first thing when we think about that is how do we show that to other people? When we think about vulnerability, it's like, I'm not vulnerable with anybody. But really, vulnerability starts with showing it to yourself. We avoid so much within ourselves, and we're not speaking the truth to ourselves. We pretend like things are okay. So how am I, if I'm pretending and waking up, like pushing this stuff down, going to share that with my partner? Right? Like I can't, because it's not real. Like I'm not being real with myself. So really turning inwards is the first thing. And then knowing and trusting yourself that you chose somebody, your person, that they're going to be safe and non-judgmental. So when you bring something to them, that they're safe, and you're really trusting yourself because you're trusting that you chose somebody that got your back. Like that's not, they're going to love you unconditionally.
Yeah. So you mentioned like a safe space for the like say the partner who needs to be vulnerable. How do you encourage the partner who is on the opposite side? I hope this is making sense. But the person on the opposite side who needs to be sure they're curating that safe space, like how do you suggest they do so? Because I know it's easy to kind of diminish somebody else's opinion, like, or dismiss.
Because I would say before she get into it, because like whenever you the other person, you do also get defensive. So like, you know, you gotta kind of like eliminate that also.
Yes. So I know this is gonna sound like a really simple answer, but I promise it's magic. Just reflecting, not responding. So you do not have to agree. I think people always think about, do I agree with a statement or disagree? We can be neutral. When people talk to us, we always go to, this fits with me or it doesn't fit. But it's just a matter of, I'm just hearing you without bias. So you feel that way about me? That's cool. I don't feel that way about me. But that's, I can hear you though, right? So for the partner who, because sometimes people say, I always try to tell them something and then they say da 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 da, right? So I would recommend, once, you know, somebody is saying something, to take a step back and just repeat back what you heard them say. And then what they are typically going to do is give you more. Yeah. And this happens and this happens. Oh, so that be happening. And you feel like that when that happens. Yeah. And they're just going to keep talking. You're just giving them space to talk. You're not responding. You're not trying to find a solution. You're not trying to defend yourself. You're just giving them that space. And then you're also able to create space on the other end for yourself too. But oftentimes we just want to respond. And it makes sense because we ask questions, and that's just a part of our language, right? Is that we respond to things, but we're just listening. We're just being this blank palette, just being here. Like, hey.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So I kind of want to switch gears a little bit to go back to kind of something we talked about a minute ago. So when Jeremy kind of mentioned like his journey through therapy, he had, and we both did, but he just mentioned it, so I'm going to use it. But some unhealed trauma before we got into our relationship. And I know, like I said, we're both still I'm still working through it. I think he's still working through it a little bit, but for the most part it's past. But like, how do you encourage healing through personal trauma and childhood trauma while also in a relationship? And do you suggest healing or trying to heal that before getting into a relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I hear people ask a lot. Like, do I do this on my own before I get into the relationship, or do I do this before I have kids? Like, it's always like, is there a step before the step, like the next step? And I think there's some work to be done individually before we move on. But I also think that, and this is my personal belief, that we're always healing, we're always growing. So you're going to do that in your relationship too. So we don't come as perfect beings.
Right.
And oftentimes, I think Jeremy had mentioned earlier, like I just had a baby. I'm thinking about all these different parts. Like that kind of gives you the nudge sometimes when you start creating your own family, that you're like, oh. So as far as unhealed trauma goes, one of the things I would say about that is just one, even just recognizing it and knowing what you like and don't like is a huge step of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard for us to reflect back on our own parents as anything is perfect sometimes.
Yeah.
Or that, you know, like my mama, you know, we get defensive about or try to protect them. Everybody loves their parents in some way or form. I mean, not everybody, but like there is a space where you try to whatever. And so being able to kind of be like, okay, let me step back. They were wrong for this and I am impacted by it, but they did the best that they can or whatever. So we do, I'm glad that y'all have individual therapists, because I usually recommend for all my couples to go to individual therapy while they're seeing me. And I know some therapists won't like this, but I also recommend that you see a different therapist than your couples therapist. And that's important. And I can explain why too, but it's not an ethical rule. So if you see a couples therapist and individual at the same time, that's fine. That's totally ethical. But that's my personal preference though. But so yes, doing the work simultaneously is important. And then also remembering that some of this work goes back to from more than what we can remember as far as trauma. That 0 to 5 age that we were is the age where we develop attachment. Those are the most important years of our lives. So 0 to 5 is like attachment with our caregivers and how we respond to and how we attach to everybody else after that. So those years are so important, and we don't recognize how much that impacts everything, you know, when you become an adult, who you decide to marry, whatever.
Okay, so because you just mentioned it, and I would love for you to hit on, you know, why your preference is to not see someone individually as well as, you know, in the couple setting.
Absolutely. So oftentimes, and I'm sorry to my guys, but I sometimes do a lot of work building up rapport with the men and like the heterosexual couples that come to see me, because a lot of times they don't want to be there or they kind of iffy about it or whatever. And so it's really important for me to protect our space and know that y'all are here with me and y'all are really like the unit is my y'all are my clients, the unit. So what happens is if I'm seeing y'all on Tuesday and then I'm seeing Jeremy on Thursday and then Leg on Friday, now we got some individual stuff. I want you to be able to be like, girl, Jeremy's socks was stinking yesterday. And then when I see y'all, I ain't looking at Jeremy like, dang, she said his feet was stinking. And I'm being a little funny right now, but usually other bigger things can come out. And I think an individual, you are an individual outside of your relationship. So you should be able to express yourself. It's not necessarily even just keeping secrets, but sometimes when we talk to our husbands or our wives, we do it in a way to communicate appropriately. But I always tell my clients in our space, like, you ain't even got to say it. Like, what was he doing? And that's my individual client, right? Or whatever it is. And I got your back. So I don't want to mix that. And then Jeremy is like, well, what was Lex talking to Jordie about last week? Because y'all got something going on, whatever. Or she feel this way. Or, you know, sometimes if I have a couple who's cheating, he already feels like I'm going to go against them. Or she already feels like I'm going to go against them. And I'm really saying like, this is a non-judgmental space. The person who cheats is not the bad partner all the time. Like other stuff may have happened. So just kind of keeping those boundaries in check is what's the most important for me.
And do you have any preference on like seeing people from like the same household, or are you okay with that versus kind of the same couple? When I say household, I mean like siblings and things like that.
So yes and no. I mean, I've seen like, and I can't, it's because of confidentiality. I can't necessarily tell who is seeing, but people will like always refer people to me. I mean, right now, that's how I get most of my referrals is like my best friend need a therapist, whatever. So I will see people who are close, the same household, usually if I can, like refer out, I will.
Yeah.
The other thing though that I like to mention, if anybody is wanting to see a good therapist and are like looking for somebody, there's a lot of therapists, and this is not an issue, I want to be clear, but this is just my preference and this will help you find a therapist. There's a lot of therapists who will say, I see everybody, individuals, couples, families, I just see everybody, all issues, whatever. But for me, if I'm going to the doctor, I want my OBGYN to do OBGYN
right,
stuff.
right.
Right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. If I'm needing an ENT doctor, I need them to know everything about my nose or whatever. And so with therapists, it's nice to go to somebody that specializes in something. So for me, I specialize with new moms, women's issues, and couples. So those are my specialties. So I don't work with kids. I don't do everybody.
Yeah.
So I know that when I'm going to see that therapist, that it's good. So going back to your question, if it's somebody in the same household, they probably have a different issue. They may not. But if they do, then I'll refer them to somebody who works specifically with that.
Got you.
Before we get too far away from it, I know we had mentioned the whole childhood trauma thing. So I want to get your perspective. Like as a partner, you notice some things that your partner maybe they don't realize or don't acknowledge that they're dealing with. Like, how would you suggest somebody going to their partner about something like that, where you like, I think that is some things impacting you that you need to get worked out? Like, how would a partner go about, by, not telling them about themselves, but just saying, hey, I see these things.
Yeah. So you know how, like, if you say to somebody, you angry, you mad, and then they get madder, and Absolutely. It's like, don't be asking me if I'm mad or whatever it is. Sometimes when you point out, even if it is a gentle, like you're not trying to criticize, it can come off as, well, you got some stuff in your past too, if you have already been doing the healing work. So what I recommend, if you do see that in your partner, is something that's called connection before correction. Ooh, so if you are connected fully and y'all are already safe with each other, I can bring it up to my husband and be like, baby, wait a minute. Something is going on here, and he knows it's coming from love. If we rocky and we've been fighting, you might not want to throw that into the fight. Yeah. That's that childhood trauma coming out.
Fighting words.
Yes. So I think making sure that y'all are on good grounds is a way to introduce it, because y'all are connected. And whenever anybody I trust and believe in tells me something, a mentor or something, it always comes good. I'm like, yeah, correct me, because I trust you, like that you know me well.
Okay. And you kind of mentioned this, and we were talking about like childhood trauma and like how like, oh, I want to heal this, because that was a big part of my decision to go to therapy, was like, I'm carrying a child. I want to minimize the things that he has to heal from, or the things that maybe I can prevent from passing on to him. So a big focus is, doing things before having children, or because we have children, kind of getting things worked out. But can you talk about just how having children in general impacts the marriage itself? We kind of mentioned individually and how it just was our decision to go to therapy, but like, as far as the marriage, how does it sometimes impact it?
Yes. So most people, not all people, but most people, whenever they have children, will see a little dip in the marriage, and that's healthy and that's normal. I think of it like juggling. So if you got one ball, you just juggling yourself, you could probably catch that thing, right? Every once in a while. You got two, you probably can do a little something with that. You like, okay, I can juggle this, but you bring in three, and I got to keep this joker alive too. Okay, now I'm talking about some professional juggling here, right?
Yeah.
So usually we see a dip, but we also see sometimes a deeper connection. Oftentimes we see whenever maybe the husband's in a room as mom is giving birth or whatever, you see this beautiful interaction. Sometimes it doesn't feel beautiful, but you see this beautiful interaction take place or whatever. You're like, oh my goodness, I love you so much more. Thank you for this life, whatever. But then you have to think, we're not just bringing a child into it. We're bringing sleep deprivation into it. We're bringing childcare or, postpartum things. All of these different
all of that.
Yes, so many different things. And so that impacts is usually like this, but if we catch it, it can come back up. Because when you get through something with somebody, you feel closer to them.
Yeah.
Like, y'all remember when we got through whatever together? And it's just like a personal connection. It feels stronger. So it's really recognizing that, understanding that our expectation is when we have kids, that it can be rough. It doesn't, that's not for everybody, but it can be. And if it is, like, how can we work through it? How can we use our resources and know that, like, we're going to get on the other side of this, and we're going to do the healing work to do that.
Absolutely. You have any questions? I just want to make sure.
Nah. Well, I will say, I mean, it's kind of a big, wide range of subject because it's like we living through it right now. So it's just kind of like, you know, I don't want to get too specific or anything, but it's just like, I mean, even
get it off your chest.
No, it's not that deep. But it's like even like you know, juggling a new child, like, you know, it's a lot. But how would you even say like an impact, like, you know, you could be like you got less time to be intimate with your partner, less time to spend with your partner, not even just sex, but just like less time. It can be, it definitely that, but you know what I'm saying? Just like sex. You know, it's a whole nother person that's in between, you know, like whereas before, sometimes with your partner, it's just y'all and y'all the only two people, like you said, you throw that third person in. So like how would you say like you kind of like work through those kind of things, because it's really hard. It's really hard.
Absolutely. So I think with that's a good point. So sometimes what we'll see is the child is always on mama or whatever, or vice versa, always on dad. And so it almost feels like, okay, all your love is going to this little being. It's like, I get it, but like, hey, I'm over here. Hello. And so that is hard. So one of the things that I say is, if we're in this space, when we go back to connecting, because we want to stay connected and we have to work on that connection. If we're in that space to connect, then we can kind of bring out this correction piece. And it's, hey, like, I'm missing spending this time with you. And it's our language says so much, because it could be like, you don't ever spend time with me no more. We don't ever have sex no more. Right? Or it can be like, I value my time spent with you so much. I would love to spend more time with you. That sounds so much different. Like, you want to spend time with me? Absolutely. So I think the way we say things, but definitely getting it off our chest and not holding it in and resenting, because a lot of the stuff with couples is that for years or for months, I've held this in because I didn't want to say anything. And I always use the example of like, I don't know if y'all did this, but with soda when you were little, like you would shake the bottle up and then like you open it and then it's just like everywhere. Yeah. Right. So what we say is like, life is already shaking us. So what you got to do is, you know, you open it a little bit and then close it up. And you open it a little bit, close it up, open it a little bit, close it up. So you feed in a little bit of information to your husband, to your wife, to your partner, whatever. And then you can close it back up. You don't have to spill it all out or criticize them a lot and tell them everything that's going wrong. But we let things settle, because things don't get shaken up a little bit later too. And then we open it up again and let it settle. And usually that's helpful when we're talking to the other person.
Anyway.
Okay. Well,
you got
go
it.
ahead.
You got it. Well, all right. No, I got it. Okay. All right. So what I heard from you speaking there is a lot of communication and knowing how to speak to your partner. And like you had mentioned, like how to phrase like what you want in the right way and how to say it, essentially like the correct way to get through to your partner. I don't know exact words I want to use right there, but I guess that goes into like, what would you say the best way is to learn how you want to be communicated with and how your partner wants to be communicated with? Because I feel like that's we always talk about communication. I feel like
it look different.
Yeah, it look different for different people. Because like that's something like Alexis would like want to hear.
I'd love to hear that.
She would want to hear like, oh, I want to reconnect and you know, blah, 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 you know, that kind of deal. Whereas it's like, oh, like sometimes it's like, tell me what you want, you know, kind of deal. So like how could you go about finding out exactly your communication style of your partner?
You got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes. So I think communication styles are just like love styles. So how we want to be loved is oftentimes the way we love other people, and we need to love them the way they want to be loved, and then vice versa. So how we communicate is oftentimes that I don't care if you communicate to me like this, just tell me straightforward. But then the other person may need something. So the way that we do that is, one, listen to them. So if you notice every time I say this is how they react, or they're telling me this, then in the moment we can practice. So sometimes even in couples therapy, I'll say, okay, y'all, let's practice. I want you to say this. I want you to say this. And then sometimes people say, ooh, that sounds mean kind of when I say it. So, okay, well, let's say it again. I don't know what to say, Jordie. Okay, well, just blurt something out. Let's fall. Let's just practice. You don't have to be perfect. So really it's practicing. Like, okay, if I would have said it like this, would have come out better? Or in asking. And that's really that piece of being vulnerable and taking our egos out of it a little bit. Okay, let's just practice right now. Let's get messy right now. Okay, I'm gonna say it like this. How you think that feel? And then they'll usually say, no, you should have said it like this. But sometimes we don't know how we want to be communicated with, because sometimes somebody will say, well, you told me to say it like that last time and I did it, and then now you're telling me to do this, right?
Yeah.
You hear that often too. So there is some piece of consistency that has to go on, but also everything when we talk about, y'all say old to black love, it's just like that self-love, getting to know communicating with yourself. What is your own inner voice telling you? All of those things helps us better communicate with other people.
Okay. And so what I was going to ask is kind of, I think relates to that a little bit, because you mentioned this connection piece a lot. What are some ways that you encourage your the couples that you see to stay connected? Do you recommend check-ins, or like, how do you encourage that, keeping that safe, connected space together?
So I'll just blurt out a few things, but I'll say this. I like to meet my couples where they are, because different couples have different things that they connect on. So sometimes it's intentional. I encourage family meetings. If you can do it every week, I encourage my couples to do it every week. It can be for 30 minutes. It can be for an hour. But if you can do it monthly, you can do it monthly. What you do in the family meetings is, if there was anything you felt like was inappropriate or you didn't want to say throughout the week, we can bring that. You can just write it down on your phone. You'll bring it to the family meeting, and you know this is a safe space. We get everything out during this time. Because sometimes it's like, ooh, they just got a promotion. I don't want to be telling them that I'm kind of upset with them about this because I don't want to rain on their parade. And then you kind of just got you. And then, oh, their birthday is tomorrow, then I can't say it now. So this space is just a space where you can just get everything out. But it's also a space for us to do financial planning, talk about sex, talk about what the month looks like, making sure that we're on the same page. What are we eating this week? You can talk about different things and they'll change. So really making time to connect in that way. But then the other thing with the intentional connection is really like, okay, we have to have a date night, or we have to go to bed at the same time at least once a night. Because a lot of times my couple will say, he go to bed at 2 a.m, I go to bed at 11. Okay, so y'all not having sex because y'all never in the bed together, or one person is asleep or whatever. So there's lots of different ways to connect, but making it a priority is the biggest thing. Sometimes even if I see a couple weekly, I say, y'all always tell me y'all ain't been on a date in a year and y'all can't do none of this stuff, but somehow y'all can come see me every Thursday at 7 o'clock. So how does that work? So next Thursday, I want you to bring a meal to session and we're going to just have a date in here. Or next Thursday, y'all don't even come see me. I want you to go do that. Because if you can make time for this, you can make time to see each other. We don't have a babysitter. What time does your child go to sleep? He don't go to sleep till 2 a.m. Well, we're going to find a schedule. And then once we get him at an 8 o'clock, 8:30 schedule, 9 o'clock, we're setting up a picnic in front of the couch and we're going to So there's usually a way around it, but that goes back to, I can't remember which one of y'all said it, but like putting in that work. We got to be really intentional about it.
Absolutely. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so I guess we kind of transition into another topic, but it's kind of stuff that we've been mentioning throughout the conversation, but conflict. When that conflict does arise, right? You ain't connecting or something happens and it causes you to get into a conflict with one another. What are some solutions or some ways to kind of manage that conflict?
Yes, I love talking about conflict. It's so
I don't.
he hates conflict.
Well, this is the interesting thing. I always like to, I call it, and y'all may have heard of this, family of origin, but we go back to our family origin. So the house that we grew up in is often how we based our conflict styles. Either we say we don't want to be like that, or we do fall into that. They one or the other. Sometimes people will come to me, and this is kind of, they'll come to me excitedly and say like, I grew up in a house and my parents never argue and they never did that. And I go, well, poor you, that's hard because you never learned conflict resolution skills. They should have argued. They should have done some things in front of you. And so oftentimes as parents, we want to shield our kids from disagreements. But now we know the research tells us we should do sometimes in front of them, not be yelling and screaming and cussing each other out, but just have those disagreements. But the part that we often miss is we disagree in front of our kids sometimes, and then we go in the room and make up. we also want to make up in front of them as well. So we have this disagreement. Oh, I get what you're saying now. So what you really meant was, okay, I love you. Let's hug it out, or whatever way that we do. So with the conflict, it's really not being afraid to go into it and being able to say, we're going to do this respectfully and have this disagreement. And if we can't do it respectfully right now, it's okay to take a time out.
Yeah.
The timeout is a planned timeout and not a I don't want to talk to you, click timeout.
That'd be the main one.
Yeah, it do, huh?
So it'll just be like, hey, I need a couple of minutes, or I need an hour. Let's just take this time out and then we'll come back to it. But it really is noticing like the trigger. What was it about what, Brittany said that made that trigger go off on me? And I felt like I need to. Or what was it about what he said or she said, whatever? Because noticing in your own body what it was that put you over the edge, it was like, I feel a certain type of way, is going to be important, because that's how you're going to teach your partner how to communicate more effectively with you. But the biggest thing that we don't want to do, again, is avoid. Because when we avoid the conflict and the conversations, that is when we see the biggest catastrophes happen in relationships. So talking it out and letting it be messy is totally fine, but also knowing we're going to have to come back to conversations multiple times.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I think you called it childhood origin. Is that what you said? Family origin. So in regards to relationships, because I think that's nail on the head with our two conflict resolution styles.
Yeah, totally different.
How do you encourage couples to kind of forget what they had, especially if it wasn't healthy, and learn something new together? Because I grew up with the yelling and the screaming, and that's what I saw. And so not that I'm always yelling and screaming, but I naturally will get loud. My voice may elevate versus his. I think what you grew up with was more so.
Yeah, it's more private. So therefore that kind of, I say I might still be, I'm more kind of like shut down because I'm not used to conflict. Like I never really grew up seeing a whole bunch of conflict. So it was like, whereas she was more of the aggressive, let's like air it out right here, right now. I was more like, I don't want to do this at all, And
yeah. So how do you encourage couples to kind of do better?
To go through that. So I want to go take a step back and just say this. Usually the way we deal with conflict is a way to protect ourselves. So if we go into it with love and know that this person is just trying to protect themselves and it's the best way they know how. So if I stay silent, that protects me. If I raise my voice, that feels like it's protecting me. When we go into conflict like that, because that's what conflict is about. How can I protect myself? Right? So if we go into it knowing that they're just trying to protect themselves, then we can say, what's a different way that I can protect myself? The other thing is going into it knowing why I'm doing this. So it's not enough to say, my mom yelled, and so that's why I yell. Well, why did my mom yell? So when I think about talking, and I'm just using yelling because this is something that happens in families. As I'm talking to you guys right now, I'm using a voice where you all can hear me, but it's not super big. If there was 500 people in front of me right now, what would I be doing? I would be talking really loud.
Yeah.
I would be like, whatever. And it's so they can hear me. A lot of times people yell to be heard. And let's just going back to the beginning of today when I started, of everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be seen. So what is the purpose of how I am communicating? I'm trying to portray this message. This is what I want you to hear. And so I feel like if I'm louder, you're going to hear it. Or if I keep saying it over and over, because you ever get in an argument, you already said that. I heard you say that already. It's like, they don't feel like you're hearing me. Like you're not hearing me. So I'm just going to keep repeating it. Right. So thinking about what purpose it serves, and then we can do the work on changing what is going on. And the changing work is asking your partner, how would you like me to say this? How do you receive feedback well? And sometimes it's looking at outside places and saying, okay, well, my boss says this triggers me too. Or maybe this doesn't. And thinking about when this happens with my friends, or this is how I receive feedback here or there, and then being able to incorporate that into the relationship.
That's good. And you just mentioned triggers. And so that there's been I think triggers and kind of how to handle them have been floating around social media. So since I have you, I kind of want to get your opinion when it comes to people's triggers. Is it is it their responsibility to handle those triggers and not be triggered by others when they happen? Or is it the people around them to try to be cognizant of their trigger or something that they know will trigger someone else? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that's a great question. So when we talk about people around us versus talking about our husband or wife, I think those are two different things, right?
Ooh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So the people around us are not responsible for our triggers. Obviously, we're responsible to be kind, loving human beings, but everybody's not, and that's the reality. But I do think there is some space in which if I know that my husband is triggered by something, I'm not going to go out my way to hit below the belt to turn on that trigger. Yeah. But also, it's also his responsibility to do his healing work as well. I know that some things, especially when it comes to childhood trauma or just trauma in general, are hard to heal from. And you can do the work all you want. But if you see a certain thing or you smell something that triggers a sense or something like that, it's just hard. It's not necessarily like this, I can just get completely healed from it type of thing. So I think there is this mix of like, if I know you don't like something or I know this is going to make you uncomfortable, I'm not going to put you in a situation as somebody that I live with, right, to do that. But you also got to be doing your healing work too. So I think it's a both and type of situation.
Absolutely. Okay.
No, that's good. I was gonna. I didn't really have to ask because it's just kind of like you just don't do it. But I will say, like, going to therapy, you when you start to go to therapy, you learn a lot more about your partner if they go and vice versa. Like, I feel like we ran into that issue. We maybe was not oversharing together, but oversharing what we learned about ourselves together, and therefore you kind of open up some more vulnerability and some more opportunities to hit below the belt.
Yeah.
That kind of deal. I mean, I know the answer is to don't do it, but like that's a hard thing to do. So what would you say? I guess that's kind of a good question. When you go to therapy individually, I guess what is kind of the cutoff that you should share with your partner? Like what you talked about that day, what you learned about, that kind of deal. Cause like we definitely had a few.
Yeah, we crossed the boundaries probably.
I think that's a great question. And I also think that looks different for different couples.
Yeah.
I know some couples who they know a lot about each other. There's not really much surprise on either end. And they don't necessarily feel like they need to hit below the belt when an argument comes. So they can kind of handle it. And you got to think somebody been married 20, 30 years and they're in a healthy relationship. They probably know it all and they feel comfortable if they're in a healthy relationship not to. But if you're in a relationship 3 or 4 years, 5 years, even or whatever, it's still fresh. It's still new. It can feel like we've been together forever. Yeah. And so sometimes we are still bringing some of that family of origin stuff, how we grew up. It's hard. It seeps in, even though we don't want to. And we try to, again, that conflict is about protecting ourselves. So I got to fight back and I know this is going to get you. So I'm going to hit you below the belt. So I feel good. But once you start truly feeling good and you're healed, I don't know that it matters so much that what you're sharing with your partner, because you're not going to take that information and do anything with it, but just keep it safe, right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, because I feel like in that space, we probably just wasn't at the
we wasn't right there. Yeah, we're still working.
Yeah, because we did have some experiences with that where we would just want to share so much about what we were learning in therapy. And I think it was just one conversation where things got heated. I can't remember what was said.
I mean, it probably wasn't nothing super malicious, but just like bringing it up, like, see, that's what
your therapist was talking about,
or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
It wasn't hit below the belt per se, but it was like I shot. See your therapist, and it's like, whoa,
I see your flaws. I see your flaws or whatever. So, but that's funny. Yeah,
funny. But it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
This though, when y'all are talking about that, because when we think about seeing each other's flaws, I always talk about it like this. So all of us have something. We all have a story, right? Yeah. That nobody knows about. And how I say it is, I have quite a bit of patience. So if I go somewhere and somebody calls me a name on the street, it does not bother me. I'm like, that's so, like, I feel so bad for you that you're having a rough day, and that's my response to that. But the next person over, if that happened to them, they might be ready to fight, right?
Yeah.
But same exact experience given to two different people and they respond differently. So even though we may bring our own trauma, why are you triggered by some of my trauma or whatever? What's going on for you that's being triggered about this or whatever? So it's not even so much the things that we went through, it's how are we responding to other people's stuff? Because if we responding like, you must have had a heck of a day if you felt like you need to cut me off in traffic today, or you must really got to go somewhere or whatever, instead of honking a horn and all these words or whatever.
Shut up. I'm working on it. I'm getting better.
But that's just like that perspective taken type outside of myself and being able to hear people and have empathy for other people, which can be rough if we've been doing this like single, like we've been taking care of ourselves for so long.
Right.
Yeah. So what would you say about family conflicts? Like, let's say, like, you know, people have to deal with in-laws. I think that's a part that people always know, like getting married, but it's like, it's really can be a thing. And it's hard for somebody to critique your family, or, you know, for you to even see what your family has even done wrong, because like, you know, like you said, you grew up in a house, so you kind of used to it. So how would you say, how do you, you know, I know every situation is different, but what's some ways to get through, you know, the issues with the in-laws per se?
So I'm very much once you know this is official, this your person that you're doing life with, let's just put the boundaries up right away. What we do is somebody's playing the middle person. So that's your family. Tell them da 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 da. You know we doing this. Tell them da 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 da. Instead of this is how I feel, and it's okay that your in-laws don't like all of you. That's okay. Yeah. Sometimes we want to come into families and be in this space of like, I don't want to step on no toes, or tell your mama this, da 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 da, or we got this going on. But if it's just, this is how I raise my child, or this is how we do this particular thing, or whatever it is, the issue is, then we're going into it with a space of you guys talking about the issue together and getting on the same page and not throwing each other under the bus, but also having each other's back in a way of, I can understand where you're coming from. This is what we've agreed on, and this is how it relates to our in-laws. But to Jeremy's point of like, well, I kind of agree with it though, or, you know, so because sometimes that doesn't, like, I mean, I love you, I'm married to you, but I mean, you know, whatever. Really trying to have that conversation of, does it have to be an either or thing that we're disagreeing about, or can it be a both and thing that like a little bit of this and a little bit of that? The problem that I see and run into with a lot of my couples though is if one person is having problems with the in-laws, they're not usually feeling validated if you stick up for your family all the time, or you can always see your family's point of view and mine, and you're just trying to maintain this balance. So sometimes you got to pick a side of your daddy was doing this or your mama was doing this type of thing. But I don't like that it's always the person who's a part of the family relaying the messages, because then it's just, oh, you know, such and such's wife, or such and such's husband, or da 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 da. Yeah. So really just putting those boundaries up of, this is how I am. Like, and once we put those boundaries up of, this is how we live our life, this is what we do, they're going to dislike it. And that's okay, because people shouldn't like every single thing about you. That's not healthy either. And then we can move on from there too.
So to touch on that a little bit more, or I guess I got a question about that. So when it comes to like, okay, this is the decision we're making, and this is how we're going to live our life. When maybe one of the in-laws comes to that and voices a disagreement with that, how do you encourage couples to handle that? Like anytime it's brought up from an in-law about a disagreement about how you're living, do you encourage them to do something about that together, or what?
So, I mean, again, going back to that connection piece, depending on how close you are with the in-laws, it's obviously, we want to make sure that the message is delivered well. So sometimes if you're not close to the person, the message is not going to deliver well. If they are in-laws, I'm not saying you can love people from afar, but we want some type of love in the situation that y'all can at least tolerate or whatever. So sometimes it is better, and this is case by case, but sometimes it is better that the person who has the better connection is going and saying, hey, this is what we doing, this is my wife, and I'm gonna stand behind her or whatever. But I think the other piece is sometimes it's inviting them to lunch or over to the house and having a conversation of like, hey, I get that you don't like this, or I get that this is very different than what you imagine. This is why we've chosen this, and this is what we've chosen, and we just don't have to agree to disagree on this situation.
Okay, that's good. All right. So kind of switching gears here as we wrap up the episode. When you see couples in relationships and things like that, whether they're married or they're just started dating, do you have any red flags that you see as a therapist and green flags that you think people should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so I think there's so many, and I think we've heard so many. One
Yeah.
of my favorite words is love. Like, love is like everything. It's what's inside of us. It's what we should share with everybody else. So I think there's this thing of like, how are they treating themselves and how are they treating the other people around them
Mm,
can be a red or green flag, right? And how am I treating myself? And if my self-esteem is down and all of these things, I may accept something from somebody that may not be what I deserve,
mm.
because you're worthy no matter what. But
Yeah.
sometimes if you're not in a good place and you try to start dating, that could be a red flag, because you don't have that self-esteem or whatever. But thinking about how are people just treating people in general. And then the other thing is, how do they act with me versus how do they act with other people? And is it authentic with both?
Mm,
Because when people start switching it up with you and you're supposed to be trying to date or talk to them or like them or whatever, it's kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Because you're a different person out there than you are, right?
mhm.
And so thinking about just that consistency component. Are they consistent with showing up with you, with talking to you? Are they going days without doing so? All of these different things I think was important. And then the communication doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of us don't have it down perfectly because we communicate with people so differently, right?
Yeah.
Everybody we talk to has a different communication style, has different lingo they use, whatever it is. And so it doesn't have to be perfect, but there should be an attempt to like, I'm trying to communicate. I have this sense of I want to grow, I want to learn. There's like some type of hope or, push outside of that.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of concludes all my questions. But baby, did you have anything else you kind of want to hit on?
I would. I do. I just want to thank because she had mentioned communication and not having to be perfect. I mean, what would you say to those people out there that are looking or dating? Because like it'd be hard for us to relate a little bit, but like you have to try and if you are looking for your person, you try to find your person, but also I understand that you have to extend grace to the person that you're dating, but also like not too, like it's kind of like a sweet
Fine
science, perfect
line.
middle.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like, because some people have like extend no grace, you know what I'm saying? And then you have some people that overextend. So what would you kind of say about finding that sweet spot?
So I think one of the things that I told you guys earlier about, and I'm going to bring this full circle, so just stick with me for a second, about going into couples therapy is having a plan or a goal, kind of like, okay, what do we want to get out of this? And I think when you go into a relationship, you have to also have a goal of what do I want to get out of this? So for me, if I don't need quality time or I don't need to talk to you every day or whatever, and that's just on my list of things, and the person is not coming to me like that, because your friends can get in your ear too. Oh, you don't be texting me every day? You don't really care about that? It's like, oh, well, I don't care about that. But really saying like, what are my requirements for a person, and kind of making sure that those things are met before you go into it, and knowing what those look like, and not like, it can't be my requirements is that he Jesus or something.
Yeah.
You got to be, human about it. But the other piece of it is like, okay, we were supposed to go on a date and then she called it off or whatever. Okay, that's grace, right? We can be like, all right, stuff happens. Okay, next week we were supposed to go on a date. So this is when that consistency piece comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, you trust people to be who they are. So now second week in a row. So I think giving it some time and being like, are we seeing patterns of what they're doing? Because I think grace extends so far as for us as humans to other people of like, okay, now we got to put a boundary up. So I think giving it time to be consistent and knowing what your requirements are, it's what's most important.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah. And actually, I do have another question. For people who are single, who are interested in dating and want to find someone, is there something that you encourage them to do, like make a list of what they want? Like, is there like, I don't know, any therapeutic advice in regards to people who just really want to date but can't find nobody?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the things that one of you guys asked earlier is like, do you do this healing work before, after, when? And I think the answer to that is, and lots of people will give so many different answers about you single, how you do this, whatever. I think it's just learning to love yourself in this season. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Doing your own work and letting things flow.
Yeah.
Is the basic, like, simple answer to that as far as like finding somebody, because when you're loving yourself, you find people who are compatible. So if I like gardening and I haven't done it in years, I'm not showing that true love to myself. Let me get out there. And then I see homeboy out there doing something too. Or if, being close to God is important, or I like painting or sewing. Like, when you're engaging in the things that you love and you're doing your healing as well, you're gonna be with your people, whether that's dating or friendships, because that's the thing that we don't talk a lot about, just like a love between, friendships and different things like that, right? So, but when you are in your, like, in a line, like you're aligned with the things you're supposed to be doing, things like what they are, like what they're supposed to be. So I would just say focus on yourself. And I know that's hard, because people be like, I'm tired of focusing on myself. I but yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
She cut it down, made it simple. Focus on you.
Yeah. And like you said, I feel like people will get that response of like, why I've been focusing on me. Well, keep focusing on you. Keep aligning yourself with all the things for you, so that way those pieces can just continue to fall into place, or start to fall into place. So,
well, we always got something else. I guess we always focus on the new up and coming couple, or the couple that's in. What about those people who I guess have decided to split, because I'm sure you have to deal with that in there. Like, is that also the same advice, just kind of like focus on you and rebuilding yourself, and just kind of taking your time as you go along with that?
Yeah. So you're asking, just to make sure I understand, like, if somebody has recently split, what kind of advice would you give?
After a breakup or a divorce, or however it may be, because that's
Yeah, so I really, for those people, thinking about, it is going to be a lot of focusing on you, because so much of your life, you start so many new things with your spouse, your husband and wife. So many things are wrapped into one of your many roles of being a wife, or being a husband, or being this person, somebody. So when you split, like, that role is taken. It's like, who am I outside of this piece? And so there is a lot of exploration that would need to happen to be like, what did I really like this? Or was I just doing this because he liked to do it? Did I really like to cook? Or no, started cooking, or whatever it is. And so really thinking about, like, okay, let me just take a step back. Let me try a new class. Let me try a new book, or whatever it is. And just, like, not being afraid to explore.
Yeah. Okay, and I have another question.
We rolling.
Yeah, but no, seriously, because this is something I wanted to bring up, but you may have to edit this in somewhere cute. I don't know, but I did want to talk about infidelity in relationships, right? And how do people recover from that? Because I mean, a lot of people, it's like deal breaker, no. But then some people are like,
work through it.
Can work through it. So, like, in your opinion, how, or what are the steps to at least try to work through infidelity?
Yes. So one of the things that I require if I'm seeing a couple together is that in that kind of meeting where I'm separating the people, whoever was the person who was cheating or whatever, I say, hey, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me you through. Like, let's be real, because if we not, let's not even just put on this show. I don't want to take y'all's money. Like, let's not even go through these steps.
Right.
So really getting an understanding of, like, I'm being serious about this. Are you being serious about this? Because it's one thing to be like, I'm gonna go to therapy so I don't lose my husband or my wife, right? But it's another thing to really put in the work. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is understanding the hows and whys of this happened. I know I said this earlier too, but that infidelity can look, usually we think about cheating. It can look like a lot of things. You never come home from work. It's almost like you're cheating me with your job. You're always playing the game. You're always on your phone. You're always painting, but you're not spending time with family. Because cheating is like giving attention to something else or to somebody else, right? You're always with your friends, but you never care, or whatever it is, right? So it's not even just the infidelity. It's really like bringing back this connection piece all together, because there's usually other things that go with that. So making sure that we're ready to start fresh, making sure we understand why we're doing that. What are we avoiding? What are we trying to receive from doing that? People have different reasons for why they cheat. We can that's a whole nother probably episode. Different things. And then the other thing is we have different methods that we go about within a therapeutic model of how we can get the partners on the same page. Some of that can look like, and this is just me giving y'all kind of like a speed thing. The partner who was cheated on, writing down questions that they might want to know, and the other person, coming free and answering, and we take a couple sessions to get through that, and making sure that they're honest. Some of the things are, it's not, some of the things that are off limits that we'll say is we don't talk about sexual acts or things like that are super detailed or things like that. So there are boundaries that kind of go up with that. But then it is just like this whole healing process. And it usually will take a while to build up that trust. But you really got to be committed. Like that's some work therapy. But it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And the other thing is being able to communicate when we think about the cheating or whatever that's going on, it's usually some of the small things that happen is that we weren't communicating stuff. We were keeping things inside and all of that stuff. And two of the biggest things that are hard for couples to talk about are sex and money. Things that are hard.
Yeah.
So being able to talk about those things and other stuff too is helpful so we don't get to that point.
That's good. I don't think I ever considered the fact that like cheating didn't have to look like just infidelity. It could look like being at work too long, like cheating with work or the video game. Like that's a good point. Yeah. Giving attention to something else and defining cheating as such. I think it's interesting. Like
I mean, give it a different perspective on it because
absolutely.
I mean, like even I won't say we even got to that point, but like. I mean, when you was working late, like it was like bothering me.
Yeah,
but it's like, so I could see how,
And you couldn't tell me I was cheating. Boy, you crazy, but.
And I should say too, because I don't want people to be like, that's cheating, and then we call it everything cheating.
No.
Just to clarify, but it could feel like you're being cheated out of something, cheated out of the time, cheated out of the whatever,
Yeah. No, I definitely felt what you were saying and kind of where you were coming from. But thank you for clarifying, because some listeners would be. I've been getting cheated on. Like, no, hit the brakes. But that makes sense, and I think labeling it as such, like I'm cheating him out of my time, makes it way more serious, right? Like, I'm just staying at work late sounds okay, but when you say, okay, you're cheating me out of the time I get to spend with you, it makes it way more serious and like, okay, I gotta go. So I think it's good to kind of
more important than me.
Yeah.
Say that again.
That thing is more important to me.
Exactly. Yeah. So defining it as such, I think, makes it more serious and makes you want to be more cognizant of the things that you may be making more important than your spouse. So that's good. You ain't got nothing?
No,
because we was going back. We was doing rapid fire. We was doing rapid fire there. Well, yeah, I don't have anything else, but I do want to just thank you for joining us today and giving your perspective, especially because, like I said at the beginning, Jeremy and I are really, really big advocates of therapy. I shouldn't say obvious reasons. For boundary reasons, we never even asked our therapist to come on because we want to have boundaries around who we see. So for you to be, someone able to come
therapist for the day.
Yeah, right. Therapist for the day, or the therapist perspective for the day. We definitely appreciate it. I think this was very good and gave a lot of insight. It also aligned with what our therapists be saying. So we like, okay, she be doing a good job.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, okay, yeah.
Okay, she know what she doing. But no, thank you so much. Jordie, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I wanted to say thank you guys for having me, but I also, want to just give some resources if somebody is looking for therapy. So there are a couple of places that you can find therapists. One of them is if you know a friend is going to a therapist, you can always ask for recommendations. Psychology Today is one, and you can put in your insurance and you can put in what type of therapist you want, what your problem is, what all of those things. Therapy for Black Girls is a great one. And even if you're a man, you could still go on there because they usually see different people. There's just a lot of people that see Black people just in general. There's also a therapy for Black men, and I think the page is growing. And I think it's either .net or .org. So you'd have to Google it, which is great too. There's Therapy Den, and then there's one called Open Path. And if you don't have insurance or anything like that, that is a good place to go because they offer a sliding scale fee on Open Path. And then the other thing is just a Google search of saying like therapist near me. And looking at those things, going to, doing a 15-minute over the phone consultation just to make sure that you like the person. You can interview a couple different people and make sure and ask questions and all of that good stuff. And if you are listening and you're like, yes, I need to get into therapy, I know we are all cheering you on because it is so great. Yeah. It's life-changing.
Yes. It's funny that you mentioned those resources. Not funny, but I'm grateful you did. And also the first two resources are how I found our therapist. So Psychology Today and then Therapy for Black Girls. And then I think I even asked someone for a recommendation. So thank you so much for leaving those resurces.
No, for real. Because some people don't know where to get started.
No. Yeah. And I'm running out of people to refer because I'm okay. I can't refer you to my people. Yeah. Like some people I'm like, okay, you're a little further away from me. So I can
get an appointment.
I can refer you, but boundaries. I'm like, I don't know if I want to be seeing the same person as you, X, Y, and Z. So.
And I'll just add one more thing. I know we're at the end, but I want to add this. If you are listening and you're not ready for therapy yet, if you're a couple or individual and you're not ready for therapy yet, I know everybody's like, get into therapy. And I'm a therapist and I'm like, yes, it's life-changing, but that does not mean you cannot start your healing. So get into something that's therapeutic and just start somewhere because it can be scary, as Jeremy said early, or to like even start that process. And so I don't want that to stop anybody from doing things that do heal you. So get into something, find something that is helpful. If you're a couple and you're listening, we drop some gems on things you can do to hear each other out. Start with those tools. Anything just like listening. So I don't want that to deter anybody from not doing the work because it can be done.
Woo! Now that's a word to end on. No, for real, because we'll preach therapy all day long, but even without therapy, like you said, it's work that you can still be doing. So I think that's great. Again, we appreciate you so much for being on and providing this insight. This was such a great episode. Yeah. And it was therapeutic for us to kind of hear. So again, thank you, baby. I don't really think I have anything else to add. You got anything?
No, I think we out of questions for now.
All right. Well, that's the end of today's episode. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. Again, that's at Ode to Black Love on Instagram and TikTok, and then Ode to Black Love Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Also, we got shirts.
Yeah, Ode to Black Love.
So make sure you go to odetobblacklove.com to get your shirt.
Yeah, we probably have a couple blog posts up by the time this come out too.
Yeah.
So head over there for that.
Blog. Yeah.
And besides that, I think we'll let it ride.
Yeah, we'll let it ride. Peace.